tickets, I always try and talk about a last thing possible, because to me, that's the least important of how they're going to make this decision. So you've had a good discovery meeting. Now, what do you do from there? Because a lot of times this isn't a one call close unless they're coming to you interested. But we're assuming we went outbound. They were interested in meeting with us, but they're assessing how this could help with their business needs. So post that, you want to send a proposal, and not just a clip or a link from like, here's the seating location that we talked about. Eventually, we'll get to that part, and maybe you add that as part of the proposal. But you want to talk about their key objectives that you outlined and identified. You want to talk about how you can help them achieve those key objectives. How are you measuring success? That was something I always tried to focus on with prospects and clients that I met with, is how do you quantify this? Because I know when I purchase something, I have a CFO, I have a president, I have my, other leaders within the organization who are quantifying, or how do we measure success with this? So I wanted to make sure that not only this year we get approval, but in future years we're able to measure, all right, we spent $100,000 on a suite. Here's what we brought back from that. So when someone asks, they're going to come back and they're going to renew, if not potentially grow the opportunity because they're seeing it. So working with them, and if they aren't identifying that, like making sure that you coach them on that, because someone within their organization is going to ask them that, and you need to be able to set them up well for success. I think some other things to help, move the deal forward and keep the momentum going is not just sending the proposal over email, but following that up with the video and actually walking through the proposal a little bit. I'm assuming that this proposal is just being blind forwarded to someone within the organization. So if asynchronously they could watch it on their own time, you don't have to get them back on a meeting altogether. That's one thing, actually, one of the clients that I ended up working with, they said one thing that separated me from others is I sent a video after my initial proposal, and they said they'd never seen anyone do that before. So that was something that I like to coach, and I know that works with a lot of B2B salespeople out there, of sending a video and walking through the steps in the proposal, so others who maybe weren't a part of the meeting, they could see, okay, I get why we're looking to do this, and then now they're more prepped for the next time that you meet. So you always want to keep the momentum going. You always want to make sure that you're setting clear next steps, that you're setting the next meeting. You're not just waiting and sitting back. So you're kind of quarterbacking this whole deal and making sure that you're moving the deals forward and everything like that. The other thing, like we talked about earlier, is you got to be aware of the buying committee. So understanding all the people that are going to be involved in making this decision that maybe weren't on that initial meeting, and doing your research and understanding like who all gets involved in the buying process. If you can engage with them, or if you could even call them and set up a conversation and maybe talk to them separately, just so you can answer any questions that they have, that's obviously going to help. But a lot of times the person you're working with typically knows how deals get done within the organization. If they see the value and they're motivated internally to do it, they'll find a way to kind of push that through. I think one thing that I didn't do a good enough job of as a salesperson, and I didn't encourage enough of my sales team as a leader, was like get executive leadership to come in and help, even if it's just air coverage of an email, like, hey, Tom, or hey, Sharon, I know that you're working with Tyler on my team. And just want to provide support if you ever have any questions. That goes a long way in showing that an executive within the organization took the time to engage with this person. To show if you could bring them into meetings, or if they know somebody at the organization, like a lot of times C levels, respond back to C levels. So get them involved in the process. It's also going to help you just long term, so they know the stuff that you're working on, and helps show that you're bringing big deals and opportunities to the table. But get them involved. They want to get involved because they don't. A lot of people came from a sales role and they like getting back in the mix a little bit. So use and leverage your executives. The last thing I'd say is don't be afraid to test a pilot. I think a lot of times we try and go for the full close. And if they don't buy everything, then they don't buy anything. Like we could start low, and a lot of people call this the land and expand play. Like let's just get them into something. And if we show our value and truly believe in it, then eventually they may grow into something bigger than that. So that's high level. There's a lot more that goes into how you run those meetings and post meeting to ensure success, but those are some things to focus on. So lastly, I want to touch on different technology that salespeople can use and teams can use, and then a couple final tips before we close out. One big one that I like to use in the sales process is ChatGPT, or a similar generative AI tool like that. It helps with meeting prep on the front end. So what objections may I get? You could feed it and prompt it with like, hey, here's where I'm in the process. Like, what are ways that we can move this deal forward and get it across the finish line? If you're late stage in deal and people maybe gone cold, it just gives you a different perspective where maybe you're stumped on what to do next. So those are things you could do. Another thing you could do is role play, so that you could prep. All right, here's the meeting that I'm going to have, like role play it in advance. Say, I want you to be a CMO at a tech company that I'm about to meet with about, this product or this opportunity for this team, and have it just go back and forth. You could do that through text. You could do that through the audio portion of ChatGPT. So there's a lot of ways that you could leverage technology. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're paying attention in these meetings. A lot of times we're trying to take notes and write things down and make sure you don't miss anything. So it's important that you have a call recording software so you're recording the calls that you can go back and play. It's even better if you have one that pulls out and scores the calls and gives you like the key takeaways from the conversation and takes notes. And if you could take it even a step further and they log the notes in your CRM, that's better just to save you time. But at minimum, having something that tracks that so you can be fully engaged in the conversation and something's taking and tracking your notes on the back end from a tech perspective. I haven't seen a ton of teams start to dive into that, but I feel like that's something that's going to be coming in the future, because that's starting to become more prevalent and just going to help people be more engaged in these conversations and in the process. The last thing I'll say, just from a final tips perspective, as leaders, make sure that if you want people to close big B2B sales, you're giving them the resources. One, pay them well. You're not going to get people to that point in their career if they don't see advancement in their career. They're not feeling like they're being paid or incentivized for the work that they're doing. So make sure that you're paying them. Give them extended time to upsell these. A lot of times we, cut the cord, like, all right, they bought, now we got to transfer it over to service rep because that's our process. But, for these bigger sales, sometimes you may need to be a little more flexible and incentivize them to keep that conversation going. Maybe they get comped on, a portion of the renewal or the retention the next year, and they're still somewhat engaged in the process. Like if you get a big deal like that, you don't want to just leave it to chance and give it to a junior service person that maybe doesn't have a sales mindset. Obviously, that means that you put the right people to manage those accounts. But if that means having the salesperson, support on that, I think that's a good opportunity to bend the rules or change things up that's going to do best for the business, not necessarily your structure and framework that you built out. Give them marketing analytics support. So is there content? Are there proof cases? Are there testimonials and case studies that people could build for them so they're not having to do all this work on their own? But give them the tools, give them the tech, tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, other tools that are going to help them just prospect and close deals at a higher level better. Make sure that they have everything that they need if you're expecting them to go out and get these big deals. The other thing I'd say is focusing on the right metrics and outcomes. In ticket sales, we are very activity based and activity driven. And I get it. If you make 100 calls a day, you're going to talk to 20, 30 people, and that's going to lead to, 5 to 10 good conversations. You'll set 3 meetings, 2 of those will show, 1 of those will close. Like there's all the metrics out there to justify that. But this isn't a linear process. B2B in general, especially large strategic deals, it could close in, 30, 60 days because they see an immediate need and problem, or it may be 12 to 18 months. You just never know. And you can't be so linear and calculated with that. So focus on what's going to, get to the next stage in the process. What are the outcomes that you want to have happen? How many meaningful conversations you want to have? How many opportunities do you want them to close? How many people are they moving to X stage in the pipeline? Like that's what you should focus and metric your top B2B sellers on, not how many calls did they make? Did they get X amount of meetings this week? Like that's part of it, but that shouldn't be the main thing that they focus on because they're not going to get to the right people and think from a strategic standpoint. They're going to be so focused on volume and trying to hit their activity number. The last thing I'll say, or a couple of things I'll say here, from a seller's perspective, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. There's a great book called Sales EQ by Jeb Blunt where it really talks about the empathy that goes into being a top salesperson and understanding the motives and incentives for someone on the other end. So what I mean by that is if you're like a head of sales and you're looking to make a purchase, yes, you're quantifying it from a business standpoint, but you also have selfish and personal motivations too. You want to get promoted. You want to look good. If this works out well and you bring in a new incremental revenue stream, like that can make you look good to your boss. So thinking about those things, and you're not necessarily going to use that from a manipulative standpoint, but know why some of their fears and hesitations may be and pull that out, call that out, like be vulnerable yourself so they open up and share some of those things too. Talk about some of the things on the positive side that, this could do for them and long term in their career, or at least think through that. So being, putting yourself in their shoes from any sales perspective, I think is important, especially these larger deals. And the last thing I'd say, you have to be a consultant and you have to be yourself. This isn't a transactional purchase. You're not trying to rush them through as quickly as possible. We want to create urgency and set timelines so that things don't stall. But you have to consult them and talk through how this is going to add value to their business. So you need to learn their business, what makes their business tick, how do they create and revenue streams, and how do they make money, and then tie that back to how we can help them do that from a consultative standpoint. And a lot of times too, we feel like we have to be like this different person as a B2B salesperson. We have to be, this business person, and we have to sound and talk a certain way. Obviously, you want to be professional, but be yourself. They're humans too, they're people too, and they can sense if you're being someone that's not you. So at the end of the day, make sure that you're being yourself, you're having fun with it too. So next week, I'll probably cut this into two parts because this is a little bit of a longer video. So whenever I record the next video, the thing I'll focus on next will be on renewals. So we talked about closing sales. What I think might be, just as impactful or most impactful to a business is making sure to retain the sales. Because even if you close sales at a high rate, if you're just have a leaky bucket of people that you're losing every single year, eventually, you're going to see the impact on the bottom line of the business. So making sure that you're focused on renewals. But as always, appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week or in a couple weeks in another video.